you.
And I have water right here for you if you need it. Okay, thanks. Those are both yours.
Thanks. My name is Terri Cruz, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Terri.
Hello, Reno! Woo! I am so excited to be here. I'm from Ohio. I don't know if you caught that part or saw it on the flyer. So it's still like the end of winter there. And so I had a great trip out here. It's a long trip out here, and I watched A Star is Born and bawled my eyes out, and then I watched Bohemian Rhapsody and bawled my eyes out. And I was like, you know, I'm out of Ohio. Like when I got here, the sun was shining, it was like 80 degrees. Like, I am so happy to be here. I want to thank Terri, and I want to thank the committee for all the hard work and the effort, for listening to my CD, for thinking enough of it to extend an invitation to me. So I want to say thank you. I want to thank Regina for the hospitality, picking me up at the airport. And then, of course, my friend David. It's always nice when you travel that far from home and you see a familiar face, someone that you know. And I just love him to pieces. So there's my shout out to Sound Solutions. And anyway, I'm just thrilled to be here. I'm very delighted. I'm a true alcoholic. How do I know that? How do I know I'm a true alcoholic? Because when I put alcohol in my system, all bets are off. I have no idea where I'm going to wake up, what I'm going to do. Anybody here ever open their eyes and not recognize the wallpaper? Yeah? I used to do that all the time. I mean, that was my way of life, and I'm not proud of that. So I have this drinking career that spans 12 years, from age 16 to age 28. I was only 28 when I took my last drink. I took my last drink, actually my sobriety date is October the 17th, 1993, so I do have 25 years, and it seems like a lifetime ago, but I've not forgotten. See, I keep coming back because I've got this slow leak right at the top of my head. It's just like a slow leak on a tire. And everything I've ever learned about how bad it was, what could happen to me, what could happen to other people, it all just leaks right out of the top of my head. That's part of my disease, and there's no patch for that. So you need to keep suiting up and showing up and putting that back in there and keeping that full, right? So we keep on taking out more insurance against that next drunk. And so we do that. And anyway, so let's just dive into the story. There's a lot I want to get into tonight. And my childhood isn't that different from most Americans. I mean, I grew up in a dysfunctional home. I wish I could say it was the Beaver Cleaver, and I had a mom and a dad, and we went on family vacations and had dinner every weeknight promptly at 5:30 or 6, and we didn't have any of that going on at my house. It was me and my mom and my older sister. It was just the three of us. I was raised in a single-parent home, so my older sister Pam basically raised me, and my mom was a bartender. So when I was coming home from school at the end of the school day, she was leaving for work, and she was coming in from work in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. So when I look back on my childhood, I don't have the warm, fuzzy memories. I have memories of just me and my sister. I have memories of her getting me ready for school because my mom was still sleeping. And I do remember, though, that I just seemed like I never quite fit. You know, I just seemed like I was the square peg trying to fit into a round hole. There was something about me that was a little bit different, and I didn't know what it was. And I seemed like I was socially awkward. I didn't make friends easy. And somewhere along the way, I'm a late bloomer. Of course, I grew up in the 70s in this little town in northwest Ohio. There wasn't a whole lot to get into in the 1970s. And if someone said the word heroin, everybody went, oh my God. And right now, Ohio is leading the nation in heroin deaths. And it's just really an epidemic. It's got a whole new face on it. So I took my first drink probably at age 14 or 15, but I got drunk for the first time when I was 16 years old. The first time I got drunk, I had a blackout. Now, what I've learned about alcoholism over the years is that social drinkers, they don't have blackouts. Only an alcoholic has a blackout, and I have a blackout the very first time that I get drunk. So that tells me I was just an alcoholic waiting to happen. I do think it's genetic. I mean, I grew up with alcohol on both sides. My father drank heavily, my mom, obviously. I cannot qualify them as alcoholics, but I do think it's genetic. I do think it runs in families. But what I found out after that first night was how that square peg trying to go in the round hole was gone. All of a sudden, I fit. I felt like I was pretty, like I could talk. I didn't have that wall between you and me that I put up all the time. And I knew right away that me and alcohol were going to be really good friends. And my drinking career took off right away. In the big book at the bottom of page 33, Bill Wilson talks about potential female alcoholics. And he says something like, I'm just going to paraphrase him. He says something like, potential female alcoholics often cross the line and become an alcoholic in a very short period of time. And I find that to be very interesting because he wrote that in the 1930s when it was mostly men. And but it's true. And so by the time I turned 18 years old, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I'm drinking on Friday, I'm drinking on Saturday, I'm drinking on Wednesday to break up the middle of the week. I'm starting to get the DUIs. I'm starting to get some consequences for my drinking. And at some point, I become unemployable, and I was living with this dope dealer and, living high on the hog and traveling, going down to Texas quite a bit, doing things I shouldn't have been doing. And I just thought I was cute. I had this sense of entitlement, right? Like, look at me. And I just felt like I shouldn't have to work. Like, I got a high school diploma. Isn't that enough? And that's just where my head was at. And so I didn't have a lot of morals and scruples. So I would continue to drink, and I'm just going to fast forward the tape. I'm going to take us to April 3rd, 1993. It's a Friday night. I'm 28 years old. I've been drinking now for 12 years. I'm with my sister. By now, my sister is the only female left in my inner circle. I don't have any girlfriends. There's no women in my life. I don't like women. I don't hang around women. My sister and I had gone to a bar. Actually, we had bar hopped, but we ended up at a bar called Sideways, which was probably 5 miles from the farmhouse where I had just spent the last 10 years of my life. So I knew exactly where I was at. I was drunk. My sister was drunk. This guy I was dating, Tony, he came staggering in about midnight. He was drunk, and he wanted to move to another bar, which was in Elmore, about 5 miles from where we were at. So he hopped in his Camaro. My sister and I hopped in my Buick, and we were driving down State Route 51. There's one curve on that road, just one. And as I entered into the curve, I remember Pam and I were arguing. I had just passed the road to take my sister home. And she was drunk and she wanted to go home. But see, I'm selfish because I knew if I turn on that road and take her home, he's going to continue on. He's not going to go to the PI. God only knows where he's going to end up, and I won't see him till tomorrow. And it's just going to be a big fight. So I made her go with me. And that's what we were fighting about. And I had shouted something at her. And in that moment, I had entered into the only curve on that road. And instead of turning my wheels to the right, and it's not even a sharp curve. You don't even have to slow down. You just have to navigate and turn to the right a little bit. And I just continued going straight on a forward path, and I struck an oncoming car. And I killed a 14-year-old boy that was in the back seat of that car. That's what I did. And I don't want to paint a picture of a young woman who was unremorseful and didn't care. But I would say to you that I was as remorseful and I took as much responsibility as I was emotionally capable of doing at that time in my life because I was emotionally thwarted. I was emotionally retarded. I had the emotional IQ of probably a 14-year-old. And so in the summer of 1993, I had several court appearances. I had like a pretrial, an arraignment, and a this and a that. And every time I turned around, I was on the front page of the Toledo Blade, the Port Clinton News Herald, the Fremont News Messenger, Channel 13, Channel 11, Channel 24. One of the kids in that car, they were coming from a dance. There were 3 boys in that car, and the woman was the driver. Her son was sitting directly behind her in the back seat, and then another buddy over here, and another buddy in the front seat. One of those kids in that car was the mayor of Toledo's grandson, and so that captured a lot of headlines. And so in the summer of 1993, I would continue to drink. My thought process was, if you had my problems, you'd drink too. Not that I ever needed an excuse to drink, but by then, by 1993, by the summer, I didn't have anywhere to turn except to the bottle, because by then I didn't even have a friend. I didn't even have a friend. And so on October the 22nd, 1993, Judge Paul Moon in Port Clinton, Ohio, sentenced me to 4 to 10 years in prison. And he could have given me, his options were 2 to 10, 3 to 10, 4 to 10, or 5 to 10. Those were his choices. And I went in there expecting, because my attorney told me to expect it, the 5 to 10, because my victim was only 14 years old and because I had 2 prior DUIs. And so Mothers Against Drunk Drivers got involved in my case, and they showed up at these court hearings. And the morning of my sentencing, the courtroom was packed. They were pulling in chairs from closets. The jury box was full of the media in Northwest Ohio. Cameras were flashing. It was crazy. It was just insanity. And much of it is a blur, but what I do remember, what sticks out in my mind about that morning is when he sentenced me. He took my driver's license for the rest of my life. He said, "You will never again drive in the state of Ohio or any of the other 49 states." And he sentenced me to 4 to 10 years. And what sticks out in my mind is in that moment when he banged the gavel, the only person there to support me that I wanted was my mom. And I just have this haunting, it's a scream that just kind of echoed off the ceilings in that courtroom. It was her. And, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I always used to say, well, I'm not hurting anybody but myself, right? This is my life. I'm not hurting you. How am I hurting you? And there was my mom. And then the boy's mom was actually sitting at the defendant's table not far from me, sobbing. And I am ashamed to report to you that I had zero compassion for either one of those women because I was numb. I couldn't feel a thing. All I wanted them to do was get handcuffs on me and get me out of there because I was just like done having my picture taken. That's where I was at. And I hate that. And you can't undo that. You know, it's like once the toothpaste comes out of the tube, it's out. You know, once a cucumber becomes a pickle, you can't go back. But I'm not hurting anybody but myself. It's my life. And so they escorted me next door, and I would sit in the county jail for about a week while they processed my paperwork. And one morning they woke me up at like 6 a.m. and gave me an orange jumpsuit, said, "Get dressed." And they stuffed me in the back of a sheriff's car, and they drove me down to central Ohio. It's about a 2.5-hour drive down near Columbus, a little town called Marysville, a maximum security prison for women, where all the women are processed through. And they just dropped me off. And there I was, in this sea full of women. I don't even like women. And there's like 2,000 women. And the only thing that I'm really good at was using my good looks to manipulate men. That's what I was good at. And these men weren't trying to hear it. None of them were on me. I know, right? Imagine that. And so it didn't take long. They assigned me a bed out in population, and I developed these quirky behavior patterns early on in my sentence. Like I would do my hair and my makeup, and I would iron my little khakis and have the little creases. And, you know, my thought process behind that was if I could just fix up the outside, I could fool you, and you would think I was okay on the inside. And I'm dying of untreated alcoholism, and I got no idea. I know nothing about that. I don't even know that I'm an alcoholic. All I know is I just cannot stand myself. I can't stand looking in the mirror. I can't stand thinking about what happened in the road that night. I can't stand the thought of somebody finding out why I'm there. At that penitentiary, I don't know if it's like this out here, but in the women's facilities in Ohio, if you've harmed a child and the other inmates get wind of that, even inmates have standards. You don't hurt the babies. And they will make your stay extremely difficult. And I know it was an accident and he was 14, but I was just mortified that, you know, they might label me like that. And somewhere along the way, this rumor had started to circulate that I was incarcerated because I was some high-ranking executive at some big bank in the state of Ohio, and I embezzled millions of dollars, and I'd been traipsing off to Europe, and I loved that rumor. I thought, I don't know how it got, I didn't start it, but I never said a word to dispel it, because you know what? Being a girl that took money from a bank, to me, was a whole lot better than being a girl that killed a 14-year-old boy. And so I would continue on. It didn't take long. I was there, I don't know, it was under a year. And they moved me to the Northeast Pre-Release Center in downtown Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio's best kept secret. It is right in the heart of downtown, a minimum security facility. It houses 650 inmates, and back in the mid-1990s, the only requirement to be housed there was be minimum status and be within 4 years of going home or seeing the Ohio Pro Board. So there were women that had been locked up for 25 years in downtown Cleveland, Ohio, doing time because they worked it down to a minimum status and they were within 4 years of seeing the Ohio Pro Board. And there's an on-ramp. It's right near a freeway, and there's an on-ramp. And if you go over by housing units E and F and you stand there and you watch long enough, somebody's boyfriend's going to stop on that on-ramp, and he's going to toss a bag of weed over that fence. And the first time I saw that, I thought, oh, I could do time here. I could do this. This is a non-issue. And it was totally different because the joint I had just left was this maximum security joint where I just felt this squeeze and this pressure all the time. I got up to Cleveland, and it's like, anything goes, oh, okay. And so I started going to some AA meetings after I got settled in Cleveland, not because I thought, oh, there's something wrong with me, or I was contrite and maybe I need to get some help. I was going to the meetings because I had this pro hearing coming up in 1996, and I thought maybe if I did some AA meetings, they would record my attendance and the Ohio Pro Board would see that and smile on me at my hearing. So in the winter of 1996, like I want to say maybe January or February, I had a friend, her name was Denise, and she was locked up for same thing. But the victim in her accident was her best friend in the passenger seat. Childhood best friend, and she got the minimum sentence, was like a 2 to 10, and that girl's mother, because they grew up together, they had been friends their whole life, that girl's mother, the victim's mom, wrote a letter to the Ohio Pro Board and said, we love Denise, we forgive her, please send her home. And I was standing outside in the Cleveland winter, this is a true story, I was standing outside in the Cleveland winter and waiting for her to come out. She was in there at her parole hearing, and I'm waiting. She finally comes out and tears are pouring down her face. I said, what happened? Oh my God, what's going on? They just gave me the whole 10 years day for day. I said, what? She said, yeah, in fact, I'm not eligible to be housed here today. I'm riding back to Marysville. I said, oh my God. And like 2 months later, a situation just very similar to that, not that same one, but something similar to that happened again in 2 months. And I called home. I called my mom because I had that hearing come up in May. I said, Mom, I've seen 2 vehicular homicides since January get the whole 10 years day for day. And my mom was like, oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Maybe they had multiple prior DUIs. Maybe more than one person was killed. You can't compare yourself to them. You're going to be fine. And so in May of 1996, I get to my first pro hearing, and I'm not fine. Like, I'm not okay. Like, I later learned, I didn't know it then, but I later learned that man and his wife, they got in their car and they drove from Toledo down to Columbus, Ohio, and they had a meeting with the Ohio Pro Board, and they begged them, do not let this woman out. She needs to be held accountable. And they gave me the whole 10 years day for day and threw me an orange jumpsuit and dressed me out and stuffed me in the back of a white van and drove me down to Marysville and dropped me off. And there I was, in admissions again, locked in a box, just like you see on TV with a sink and a bunk and a toilet, locked in a box, unable to talk to anybody, and unable to make a phone call, watch TV, smoke a cigarette, like locked in a box. And I couldn't even cry. And I had just given up 8 years of my life. And when I think back on that woman who was locked in that box, and it's just likened to the boy that whistles in the dark to keep his spirits up, I just could not look at it because it was so big and it was so ugly and I couldn't handle it. I didn't even know what to do with it. I couldn't even take care of myself, much less take responsibility. I didn't know what that would look like, and I didn't have a reference point. But I had been going to a couple of meetings, and I don't know if seeds were planted, but by now I'm just mad because I'm thinking, why should I do any programs? You've stripped me of all my good days, and you set in place that I'll never earn another one. 10 years day for day is 10 years day for day. From October 1993 to October 2003, that's the window. This is where we're at. Not one day off for good behavior. And I'd never got in trouble while I was there, ever. So I had the staff down there full. They all thought, oh, she's just this nice, sweet girl from the country. She's got a high school diploma. If you've got a high school diploma in the penitentiary, that thing is like gold. You will not sling a mop or flip a soy burger. They will find a real job for you. And they found a real job for me. I had my own office. I worked in the warden's area up in the count office for Lieutenant Wasmer. I had 3 inmate runners that were assigned to me. Their job was to sit on the church pew in a hallway outside my office. And when I get done typing these very important documents, because you know how important I am, right? And I was typing these very important documents, I'd whirl around and I'd say, I need a runner. And if one was back there, then they could step in my office and take that document and go get it signed from Lieutenant Wasmer and then go with it. Now, if that doesn't feed your ego in the penitentiary, I don't know what will. And there I was, trying to be all I could be in the penitentiary. So one day I had typed up all these bed moves. What I was doing was moving inmates around, bringing them from admissions into population, and then the housing units in population, there was so many of them. Some of them were warehouses with rows and rows of bunk beds that you couldn't hear yourself think. And some of the older housing units were two-man rooms that everybody wanted to live there. So I was doing seniority moves out of the warehouses into some of the smaller, just a lot of stuff. And I had typed up all these bed moves, and I couldn't find Lieutenant Wasmer. So I ran into the tie office next door, and it was like 3:30. I go, oh, my God. I go, Miss Floyd, could you sign off on these bed moves? The 4 o'clock count is never going to clear if these girls don't start moving and get onto the correct bed that they're supposed to be on for the 4 o'clock count. And she said, oh, absolutely. She goes, come on in here. She goes, I want to talk to you anyway. And she's signing off on these documents, and she's like, Terri, there's a really good program over at Recovery Services called Hearts. Have you ever thought about treatment? I said, treatment? Treatment for what? Right? Like, I don't get it. And she said, well, it's a recovery program. And I was honest with her. I said, Miss Floyd, at this point, I'd been locked up for 5 years. I had served 5, I was at the halfway mark, and I told her, I can't even earn a good day. I'm not going to AA, victims awareness, the parenting classes. I'm not doing any of that stuff because there's nothing in it for me. And then she said the magic words that my ego just loved to hear. She said, well, there's a 2-year waiting list to get into that program, and I can pick up the phone and make a phone call, and I can get you into the next group. I said, well, sign me up. Somebody has finally realized how important I am, and I'm moving to the top of a 2-year waiting list, right? And so she made the call, and I got put in the next, and it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, I got put in the next group, and I had no idea what I had got myself into. This was an intense behavior modification program, and I didn't know anything about it. And so what they had to do was reassign my job. So now I don't go to the warden's area Monday through Friday from like 8 to 4. Now I go over to the R&R building. That stands for Recovery and Religious Services. And I'm a student. My job title is student in the Hearts program. So just to give you a preface so that you have a framework of what this program was like, about 2 weeks in, I realized how terribly I'd screwed up. There are 16 women sitting at a giant couple of long tables butted up together. 15 of these women are inmates. 14 are going through the program. We're students. We just got there. The 15th inmate's already been through it. She works for Recovery Services, and her title is peer leader, and her job is to give feedback. And then the 16th woman in the circle is an employee of the state of Ohio, a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. And she kind of keeps things, she runs the show. So on this Wednesday, about 2 weeks in, we came back, we circled up around the table. The girl that was sitting across from me, I heard the rumor out in the yard she was there because she killed her daughter. I didn't know if it was true, but she never talked about her crime, so it was always suspicious to me. And we come back from lunch, we circled up around the table, the counselor looked at that woman and says, why don't you tell these other women what you did to your daughter? I remember thinking, oh my God, like she's not going to go there. And she went there and she told the story. And I'm not going to repeat it, it doesn't have a place here, but I would just say to you that it was as bad as it gets. And the way the program is set up, after you share, you receive feedback, and during the feedback process, while you're getting feedback from everybody else in the circle, hands are flat on the table, feet are flat on the floor, you sit up straight and you do not speak. You don't lift those hands up, you don't move those feet, you sit there and you listen, and you might be sitting there listening for 2 hours. It gets bad, and they call that an encounter. And the point is so that you have an encounter with your real self, and it breaks your walls down. So on that afternoon, her encounter was pretty bad. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, oh my God, there's going to be a day when they're going to ask you about what you did, and you're going to be in the hot seat. And I knew my days were numbered. And so that was on Wednesday. Friday, we come to group 2 days later on Friday. We come back from lunch at 1 o'clock. We circle up. She looks at me. She says, why don't you tell the story about that night you wrecked your car? And I thought, God, I knew it was coming, so I just sucked it up. Suck it up, Buttercup. I sat up straight. I told a story. And so the story, the images of what happened in the road that night were, I was not in a blackout. Like, I remember all of it. The problem is that I was disconnected from it. I told the story. I tried to tell it from my heart, like I was crying a little bit, and I was, emotionally attached to it and having this emotional vomit. And the truth of the matter is I told it from my head. And, at that time in my life, my head was especially a dangerous place because I had, my disease was up there and all these committees were up there and my ego's up there. And it's just not a safe place to be. And so I tell the story from my head. And when I got done telling the story, I put my hands flat on the table, my feet flat on the floor, and my feedback went something like this. Boy, if I didn't know any better, I'd think you were the victim. And you make me sick. You take no responsibility for what you did to that 14-year-old boy. And I can still see the counselor banging her fist on the table. Do you want to save face or save ass? Because you cannot save both. And I wanted to save both. And I was crying. I couldn't believe they were talking to me like that. And I had this wall that I had put up. I'd had that wall up for years. And on that afternoon, it just seemed like those 15 women had hammers and chisels and picks, and every time one of them opened up their mouth, they just were banging on that wall and banging on that wall. And at one moment that afternoon, I just had this brief moment of clarity where it seemed like a beam of light was able to make its way through the wall, and it just pierced me right there. I had one brief moment of clarity where I saw it in its entirety from a different perspective, and I went, oh my God, what have you done? And then that quick, I just shut it down because I couldn't handle it. And there were 15 women jumping on me, and we're not going to get vulnerable right now while everybody else is in attack mode. And I shut that down. I kept staring at that clock and staring at that clock. I was waiting for the 4 o'clock whistle to blow so I could go back to my room and I just wanted to get out. And it finally came, and I jumped up and I grabbed my book, and that counselor looked at me and she said, "Not so fast. When you get back to your room, I want you to write a letter to that 14-year-old boy. You bring that to group on Monday." And I'm all crying and teary-eyed, and I don't know what to say, and it's just going to be all wrong anyway because I can't say anything right. And she's like, "I'm not going to tell you what to say. I don't even care what you say. Just write him a letter, bring it to group on Monday. Oh, and one more thing. When you get back to your room, I want you to wash that makeup off. I'm placing you on makeup restriction for the next 2 weeks. I don't want to see any makeup on you." I know, you're laughing. I was like, and I was mad. I said, whatever. And I get it today, like peeling away the layers of an onion. But at that time in my life, that was my mask. I was hiding behind, fixing the outside up. And I go back to my bunk on that Friday afternoon, and I climbed up on there, and I grabbed a pen and a paper, and I started to write. And it was 4 pages, front and back. I was in an emotional state. It just seemed like they had taken a knife and sliced me down the middle, and I was wide open, and my guts and my icky and everything that I've tried to stuff down was just oozing out all over the place, and I was extremely vulnerable. And I wrote a letter, and my letter was 4 pages to this kid, and I said things like, "You're never going to graduate from high school. You're not going to go to your senior prom. You're not going to marry a wife. You'll never make babies. I have taken all of this away from you and so much more." And I was wrapping my brain around the size of it and the gravity of it because a space had opened. And my favorite line that in the big book is on page 30. Bill Wilson writes on page 30, "We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic." And if I said to you, our innermost selves, what does he mean? Where is that place? That's the place where I was at Friday. It's down here at the soul level. That's where I get the work done. I don't think or read my way through it. The work is done down here. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was I was dying on the inside because I'm a stuffer. And I'd been stuffing it down, and all that stuff over the course of that weekend started coming up. It was right here in my throat. I was just choking on my own crud. I needed to have an emotional vomit. That stuff, and I didn't even know. I need to do a step 5, and it's urgent because I'm going to die if I have to live another day with this gunk in me, this toxin and this poison. is the thing that's killing me. It's why I can't look in the mirror. It's why I look at you and judge you and I think you're outside. You look good. Why can't I look like that? Why can't I feel like that? What's wrong with me? I've had a disease. And it was untreated. So I get back to group Monday morning at 8 o'clock. We circle up around the table. The counselor looked at me and she said, I said to the counselor, I've got my letter. She said, that's good. I said, well, I want to read it. Because, see, I'd made such a fool of myself on Friday. She said, you will read the letter. But before we do that, I want to revisit group on Friday. I want you to tell the story about that night you wrecked your car. But this time, I want you to tell the truth. I thought, man, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I couldn't possibly go through that again. And the next thought was, you know what? Screw it. I'm never going to see these women again. Tell the story. Give them what they want. So I sat up straight and I told the story. And it's the same story. The facts of what happened in the road that night will never change. It is not going to change ever, no matter what I do. What changed was my perception. Because I don't see things the way that they really are. I see things the way that I am. And the way that I am from Friday to Monday had shifted. So I tell a story about Jane Miller, that boy's mom. What I saw her out of her car, running down the road away from her car in the dark, in the cold. It was in April. She probably ran from here to that wall and stopped and bent over and put both of her hands on her knees and just let out a scream. Because her only son was bleeding to death in the backseat of her car. This woman was a registered nurse by the state of Ohio, and she could not save his life. And I did that. And I own that. So I got done telling my story, and I put my hands flat on the table and my feet flat on the floor, and I sat up straight, and I was prepared for them to all go like that, with their claws out like they did on Friday. And the counselor said, before we do the feedback, I want you to read the letter. So I read the letter that I had wrote on Friday to the boy, the 4 pages. And when I got done reading that, I looked up, and there were 15 women looking at me with compassion. And we were all connected at a very deep soul level. There's not really words to say what the magic, what was happening, the miracle that was taking place in the room that morning. But it was just a really safe place to just purge all that gunk and just leave it there. And it changed my life. I knew that morning when I got up and walked out of that room, I knew I would never, ever take another drink, that I would spend the rest of my life making an amends to that kid and to that family, and that I would be forever changed. I knew it. And it's true. It has come to pass. And so I want to speed up a little bit because I feel like I'm running late. So one of the women that was in that group, I told you there was a peer leader, right? She'd already been through the program. Her and I had become kind of close, and she was my unofficial sponsor, and we would sit out in the yard a lot and talk. And one day she started talking about God. I said, oh, no. I said, we do not need to go there. And she said, no. She said, we do need to go there. She goes, what do you got against God? I'm like, really, Sheila? Seriously? Really? I said, well, for one, so I had my list of things. I had an itemized list. For one, what kind of a God would have let that boy die in that accident that night? Why didn't I die? I was the offender. She said, what? I said, yeah. Like, he's God. Like, it should have been me and not him. And she said, that's the wrong question. You need to be asking what kind of a 28-year-old woman would get behind the wheel of a car under the influence of alcohol and put in jeopardy the lives of everybody else on the road. That's what you need to be asking. I said, well, okay, I'll give you that. what kind of a God would let those babies die of starvation in Ethiopia? I'm sure we've all seen the pictures with the little arms about that big and the distended stomach. I get sick at my stomach when I see that. It literally makes me nauseous. It has my whole life. I'm very disturbed by those photographs. It has always bothered me. And I asked her, what kind of a God would allow that? She said, really? You blame that on God? I said, he's God. He can make the manna. She said, I'm going to tell you something. There is no dearth of food on this planet. There is no reason that anybody should ever have to go to bed hungry. We don't distribute it. Do not ask what kind of a God would let the babies in Ethiopia starve. You need to ask what kind of people. And I had this epiphany. I had an epiphany. I had blamed God for everything instead of taking responsibility and looking to other people. I had blamed God for everything. And so she had asked me just some very basic fundamental questions about God. She said, well, let's just talk about this. Let's just see where you're at. Where do you think God is? I don't know. I suppose he's in heaven. Well, that's a good answer. I said, well, thank you. Where do you think heaven is? I suppose heaven's up there, out there somewhere. I don't know. She said, that's good. And what do you suppose he's doing? I'm like, I don't know. He's Godding? Like, what does God do? He's pretty busy. And I didn't want to say, and she finally beat it out of me. He's the scorekeeper. We all know. He's got that. I saw that. Got this one. Oh, yep, you did that. Yep. The fire and brimstone, because that's what I grew up with. That's what they told me, and that there's this place called hell. That's what I was taught. I wasn't taught about a loving God that you could snuggle up to and like have a relationship with. I was taught about the one that you need to be fearful of. And that just skewed everything, like from my childhood on, especially after that accident, because I know what my eternal fate is. And it's like, you guys ever see that commercial? I think it's Ronald Reagan's son. He's an atheist or something. He said, Ronald Reagan Jr., atheist, not afraid to burn in hell. And I just, every time I see that commercial, I just laugh. And I just think, I used to think like that, not afraid to burn in hell. And yeah, I actually am, and I don't want that for myself. And I'm sorry, but I think this is my fate. So she just asked me just to do one simple thing. She said, Terri, just do this one simple thing. I want you to, I'm going to read some spiritual books, but I just need you to pray every day and just ask God to direct your thoughts, your words, and your deeds. I thought, well, God, I could do that. My thoughts, my words, and my deeds. Yeah, I could do that. So I started praying every day to a God that I didn't believe in, that I didn't understand, that I didn't know anything about, because she told me to do it, because she had a twinkle. This woman had been locked up longer than me. She'd probably been locked up 7 or 8 years. Well, I guess I could tell you, she, in a blackout, she shot her husband in the leg. And it's not funny. He qualifies for Al-Anon because he'd come every Saturday and give her money and beg the Ohio Pro Board, let my wife come home. And I think they were trying to protect him from her. I don't know. And because every time she'd come out for pro, she'd get 2 or 3 more years. Every time. And on a 3 to 15, she did every day of 15 years in Ohio. Ohio don't play. You know, Texas gets the big, right? That's Ohio y'all need to be talking about. And so anyway, so Sheila and I got really close. And so I was praying to this God that I didn't believe in and that I didn't understand, because Sheila told me to do it. And a month later, she asked me about it. I said, you know, I just feel awkward. I feel like I'm talking to the wall. She said, good, I just want you to keep doing that. And I just kept doing that. And I walked into the library one day, and there was this book there. And I thought the cover was pretty. And it's not conference-approved literature, but if you'll ask me at some point, I'll be here all weekend. I'd love to tell you what the book is. But I read that book. And that library, actually, most of the books in there were 40 years old, but there was this book that was currently on the New York Times bestseller list, had already been translated into multiple languages because it was selling that fast, and there it was in the prison library, and I thought the cover was pretty, and I took it to my room and I read it, and it introduced me to a God that I could fall in love with and that I could understand, and that was a game changer for me. And so I came to find out that God's not up there, out there somewhere, that God's right here. And I know that God's right here. And I have evidence, because tonight when I go to bed, my fingernails are going to grow just a little bit. And when we go to bed tonight, like everybody's hair is going to grow just a little bit. Well, most of us. But there really is a God. And right now in this moment, everybody's heart's beating, and you don't get credit for that. That's not you. but surely you can't deny that there's a life force, there's an energy, there's something in you that's making your heart beat, and you're breathing without any effort. That it's happening because it's the will of God. That's why. And when I could get my brain around that, when I looked at God that way, that was a game changer for me. And that might not work for everybody, but that works for me. So I end up back at the Northeast Pre-Release Center, downtown Cleveland, Ohio. 2 years left on my sentence. I walk into the recovery services. I had served 8 years now, and I'm on the road to recovery, and I have a relationship with the God of my understanding, and I'm working the steps. And I went into recovery services, and this woman, Miss Daniels, is trying to service 650 inmates out of a tiny little office the size of my bathroom. Not kidding. And I walked in there, and I introduced myself. I said, do you have any books or cassette tapes? I'm dating myself. And she said, well, I do have, and she pulled down this cassette series. It was 10 cassette tapes. She goes, I have this Joe and Charlie workshop. I don't know, maybe you'll find that helpful. And she gave it to me, and I took it back to my cell, and during the 4 o'clock count, because every day it's 45 minutes of downtime when you're stuck on your bunk, I put on my little headset, and I put in CD or cassette number 1, and it took me about 2 minutes. I thought, oh my God, I got a little gold mine here. And those men, if you asked me who my first sponsor was, I would say, oh, it was Joe and Charlie. And they took me through the steps, and they introduced me to the first 164 pages in a way that I would not have otherwise known. And sitting with Joe and Charlie every day at 4 o'clock became part of my daily routine, and I did that every single day for 2 years. And that big book that I had at that time during those last 2 years of my incarceration, I still have it today. And if you open that thing, you can see how many times I went through it with the yellow and the pink and the green and the blue, and the binding is busted, and there's notes off in the margin, and it's falling apart, it's in a fragile state, and it looks like a big book is supposed to look, right? And so anyway, that was a game changer for me. It really, really. So on my day, my special day came, it was October 19th, 2003. I had served every single day of 10 years. Every single day of 10 years. My mom was in the parking lot. It was on a Sunday morning in Cleveland. All the leaves were turning. And I remember approaching the gate and thinking to myself, I was scared because I didn't want to drink again. And I had the gate buzzed, and I thought, oh my God, kid, this is where the rubber meets the road. Did you mean what you said? Did I get enough work done? Is there something left undone that I need to be doing? And the answer is yes. Like, I need to go to an AA meeting, and it's urgent. Like, I need to go today. And I understood that. In fact, I knew it enough that on Friday, when I turned in the cassette tapes back to Miss Daniels, I said, is there like a club, or is there like central office was not a word that was in my vocabulary at that time. Is there a place where like I could go to connect to find out where the AA is? She goes, oh yeah, that's your local central office in Toledo. Let me give you a number. When you get home, I want you to call this number. Tell them you just got out and you need to get to a meeting. They're going to help you. I'm like, oh. So I had that number. And so Sunday when I got home, I want to tell this real quick story. So we're going down the Ohio Turnpike. I had been locked up for 10 years. And we stop at one of those plazas to go potty and get some coffee. I hadn't been in public in 10 years. I feel like everybody knows. I feel like I got a tattoo right here that says ex-felon. And we're standing in the line at McDonald's to get some coffee, and my mom has cash in her hand, and I look down and I happened to notice the cash. I said, my God, what happened to the money? And all of a sudden the line got quiet, and everybody looked at me. The cashier's looking at me. My tattoo's flashing red. My mom's like, what do you mean? And so I leaned into her and I said, I got these great big giant heads on it. I couldn't tell a 10 from a 5 they had redesigned the layout, and I missed that. And so I was like, okay, keep the big mouth shut. So we get the coffee, we go into the restroom, potty break, she beats me out, I walk up to the sink, I go to wash my hands, and how do you turn the water on? She said, oh, just stick your hand under the faucet. What? So I stuck my hand under the faucet, and the water poured. I said, oh my God, I can't wait to get back in the car and see what else is out there. Everything was so different. And then, like, for the next 2 months, when I would stop somewhere to go to the restroom, I would invariably set my purse at the sink or close enough into the sink that water would go into the purse. I drenched, I can't tell you how many purses when I first got home. And so anyway, I get to my first AA meeting, and I said, hey, I just got out of prison today, and I don't know where the meetings are. I don't have a car. I don't have a license. And those women were like vultures. Newcomer! And she's serious! And they took me under their wing, and there was this woman there named Linda. She goes, tomorrow night, Janet, you get her and you take her to Genoa. You're going to get her on Tuesday, take her to Gibsonburg. You're going to get her on... And she was directing traffic and telling everybody what they were going to do and what my week was going to look like. I thought, well, I don't have anything else to do. Why not? And so that's what I did. And those first several months home, that's all I did. All I did was go to meetings. And I met my community. And I started to get active, and I got a sponsor. And then next thing you know, people are asking me to sponsor. And I just got home and gave my first lead like 3 months after I was home. And I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. I fell in love with you guys. And I just knew, like, this is home. And when I walk into AA, when I walk into a conference, there's just something so special here. And you can't put a price on it. You can't put a word on it. It's something that's in here because we're all connected. It's like we were on the Titanic, and it didn't go down. Like, we survived the Titanic, the greatest disaster of all time, alcoholism, and we are surviving it. And it's a pretty big deal to be on the winning side of that. So I got a job at the local grocery store in Woodville. Everybody knew me. Everybody knew what I did. Everybody didn't know I was coming home, and they'd walk in that grocery store to purchase their gallon of milk, and there I was to scan it. And I raised a lot of eyebrows, and you know what? I'd raise an eyebrow to a girl like me too. Like, I get that. Like, I understand that. I never once said to anybody, I have changed. You should give me a second chance. I have never said that to anybody because I knew that my conduct would demonstrate it, and that's what I needed to do, was to demonstrate it through my conduct, not my... People don't want to hear that stuff. They're over it. Like, they're done. And I don't care that 10 years had passed. I had just came home from prison. So, like, I understood the big picture. So I just kept scanning groceries and going to meetings and scan groceries and go to meetings. And that was my groove. And it took about 4 months. In my community, they'd walk in the store and their face would light up. Oh, you're here today. Oh, how you doing? And I got to reintroduce myself to my community, and then got to reestablish their respect and their trust. And one day somebody came and said that eye doctor across the street is going to hire somebody. I thought, oh, God, what kind of doctor in his right mind would hire an ex-felon like me, especially someone who did the kind of time I did. And I made the mistake of telling my sponsor about it. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, she was like, did you go apply for the job at the eye doctors? I said, no, I'm not going to waste their time. She said, well, when I pick you up Friday to go to the anniversary in Toledo, you've got all week to go. So you can tell me all about it on Friday when I pick you up. And I was like, great. And so on Wednesday, I suited up and showed up after work. And when I walked in, the only person there was the doctor's brother. He was the optician, is the person after your eye exam that you're passed off to. And the optician was there, and he was 69. He had polio as a young boy, so he drugged one of his legs. And so he just needed help filing files and scheduling and just simple things. And I walked in and I said, hi, my name is Terri. I understand you guys are going to hire someone. I'd like to apply for that position. But before we do that, there's something I need to tell you. Right away, I just wanted to, let's not waste time. And that old man jumped up out of that chair. He said, oh, my God, I've been waiting on you for a month. I already know about that. Where have you been? And I was like, oh, my God, I was across the street scanning groceries. But what happened was, so that the doctor and his brother were asking the patients, mostly Woodville residents, we need to hire someone to help Bill. Who would you recommend? My name kept coming up. Residents of Woodville were saying, there's a girl across the street, Terri. I think she'd be really good over here. And you see how I got fear? Fear's a liar. I got fear holding me back, telling me, don't go in there. You're going to get a door slammed on you. And they're waiting on me. I had the job. They were waiting on me. And fear was holding me back. So whenever I go into penitentiaries and institutions, I always tell the girls that story. Don't ever think that you have this tattoo that's going to stop you. Ex-felon makes a statement about my past. It says absolutely nothing about who I am today. Just like an ex-husband or an ex-employer or an ex-felon, it's a statement about my past. It is not who I am. And so I got that job, and long story short, a couple years later, Bill got sick and died, and next thing I knew, Dr. Law was like, I need you to be licensed, and so study this and go down to Columbus in May, and you're going to take this big test. And I'm like, oh my God, and I studied it, and I'm not good at math, and you know what I found out is that I'm really not stupid when I apply myself. And I had applied myself because I wanted that job, and I went down to Columbus and I took that test, and I'm a licensed optician in the state of Ohio. And I think that's a pretty big deal. You can applaud that. Yeah. Thanks. And I don't know where I'm at on time. Am I doing okay, David? Okay, I just got that one more story. So we're going to go to court. We're going to go back to court. Somebody was talking about that earlier tonight. He said he had been at 10 years and he was dropping, the speaker, I think the 5 o'clock speaker, said 10 years sober and he was dropping yours. Oh, honey, I'm sitting right over there thinking, honey, I got you beat. Just wait till you hear my story. Is Jacob in here? What's his name, Jacob? Josh. Josh, are you in here? He left. Darn. Okay. Well, somebody can tell him that the girl that spoke after him has got him beat. So anyway, so I started dating this guy after like 6 months of being home. Like, getting laid was at the bottom of my to-do list. I'm not kidding. Like, I did not want to date. Like, my priority was to establish myself in Alcoholics Anonymous, get a sponsor, get a job, get my own place, because I was staying with my mom. And I did all those things. Once I got all those things together, then I thought, okay. And I prayed about it. I said, God, if you can send me somebody healthy, you know. And there were people in the meetings that I had met, and my picker's broke. I'm just not good at relationships. I mean, I am today, but I wasn't then. And so one day, Eric Cruz, someone that I went to high school with, whose mom was my English teacher, that I had known my whole life. If you said to me, where'd you meet him? I don't know, probably at the Woodville swimming pool. I don't know. I just have always known him. He came into the grocery store and he goes, oh, Terri? Oh my God. And I go, Eric. And he had lost all of his hair and gained all this weight. He looked a little different. He goes, you haven't changed a bit. I go, thanks. And he said, I want to take you out Saturday. I said, I'd love that. Like, I didn't even think about it. I said, I'd love that. And we went out to dinner, and we had so much fun, and we kind of became inseparable. And 3 years later, because he had went through a really icky divorce and lost half his stuff, he swore he'd never get married again. And 3 years later, we ended up getting married. And by then, I was established as an optician, working for the eye doctor. And one day, I was reading online. You know, I'm walking to work, rain, sleet, snow. It's 0.8 of a mile one way. So I'm walking almost 2 miles every day from our house to the eye doctor. Then I walk home. And in the summertime, I'd ride my bike. I live in Ohio. I mean, so we have like 9 months out of the year. It's pretty crappy. And one day I was looking online, and there was this thing that had gone online about the driver's compact. Something had went on the Ohio driver's thing January 1st of 2004, and it's like 2009. And I'm like, and I'm reading this thing, and it says, if, it was referencing lifetime suspensions. If the offender has a lifetime suspension, yep, got that. And if 15 years have passed, yep, got that. And if during those 15 years the offender's not had any moving violations, no driving under suspension or, you know, any other crime, yep, got that. And if the reason those licenses were taken was drug or alcohol related and they've had treatment, whoop, got that. And there was like 10 things listed, and I'm reading this, my jaw dropped. I'm like, oh my God, I think I qualify for this. So I printed it, took it home, showed my husband. He's like, oh, we're getting an attorney. So we get this attorney, we have this hearing, and I end up on the front page of the Toledo Blade again. I'm 17 years sober. I work for a doctor. And I'm like, this isn't news. I'm just so discouraged. Like, this is not news. This is me trying to put my life back together 17 years later. And that boy's family showed up, and my attorney told me, I want you to fill the courtroom. So at every AA meeting that I was going to, I was asking people before and after the meeting, would you come to my hearing and support me? Could you come and support me? And this was actually before I started speaking like nationally like I do now. I was still like a baby in my local AA at home. And so like nobody owes me anything actually. And people were happy to do it. In fact, when we got to that hearing, it was elbow to elbow. It looked like it did in 1993, except it was a flipped opposite. They were there to support me. It was you guys there to support me. And the victims, his mom and his dad and his sister showed up. So there was 3 from that family, and there was like 200 people there for me. And we had this hearing, and his mom got on the witness stand, and under oath, she swore under oath. She said, I'm going to just, not verbatim, but I'm going to try to quote her as best I can. You cannot restore her driving privileges. This woman still drinks and drugs. and you cannot put public safety at risk. Do not restore her driving privileges. And the old Terri would have been sitting at the defendant's table going, no, I'm sober. But I didn't do that. I sat there and I listened to her because I understand that I have killed her only son. It is not for me to say how long her grieving process should last or even if she should ever forgive me because I killed her only son. And she can say things about me that are pleasing to her. And that was pleasing to her to say that. And I am okay with that. And so at the end of that hearing, well, he issued a decision 2 weeks later electronically, Friday at noon. So the media got it. Actually, I found out about it on the radio on my lunch break with all of Northwest Ohio. And he didn't restore my driving privileges, but he did order me to have an ankle monitor attached to my ankle at 17 years sober that I wore for I wore it for 3 months. I had to wear that thing for 90 days at $12 a day. I had to pay for it, which I was happy to do because I had nothing to hide. After the ankle monitor came off, then I dropped urines no less than once every it could have been a urine or a breathalyzer. It was random. I just had to show up at the Woodville PD because they worked with me because they were around the corner from the doctor's office. And so somebody was there to meet me, either breathalyzer or urine drop, no less than once every 10 days for 3 years. So tell Josh my story. And I was 17 years sober, and I did that until I was 20 years sober. So we go back to court in 2013, and the judge, I can still see him. He held it up, and he went just like this. He said, this woman testified that she's clean and sober. She had other people testify on her behalf that she's clean and sober. I've got scientific data that backs up her claim that she is, in fact, clean and sober, and I think it's in the interest of justice to restore her driving privileges, and I have a valid Ohio driver's license. And you can applaud that. That's AA that's God and AA working in my life because I keep suiting up, I keep showing up, I keep just doing this deal to the best of my ability. It keeps getting better. If you're new and your ass is falling off, keep coming back. It's going to get better. And I want to leave you with one last story. Is that okay? Okay. I promise this is the last one. This is a good one. You're not going to believe this. Never going to believe it. Okay, so shortly after that, this kid from Tennessee listened to one of my CDs, and he found me on Facebook with the limited information I provide about myself and my talk. That kid found me on Facebook, sent me a private message, and all he wanted to say was, hey, I listened to your CD. I did what you did. Here's a link to my story. He attached a sentencing link, like from his hearing. And he said, I just want to say thanks. I appreciate that. That talk meant a lot to me because I'm in the same boat as you. And that really touched me that he did that. And so I messaged him back, and we kind of became friends. And so that was like in August or September. And then around September, every meeting I went to, somebody was saying something like, I had an opportunity at my daddy's funeral to put my 6-month coin in his hand in that coffin, and I know that meant so much to him. Or I had an opportunity, I was in Florida last 2 weeks ago, and I went to Millie's grave, and I was able to make an amends and put my 1-year coin on Aunt Millie. And every meeting, people were putting coins either at tombstones or in coffins with a deceased loved one. And it didn't go unnoticed by me, and I said a prayer. I'm like, God, are you trying to tell me something? Nope, didn't hear anything, because I didn't want to hear anything. Because that's a big fish to fry, and I was not ready to do all that. And and then about a week later, this was all happening in the month of September. After I meet up with the kid, on Facebook from Tennessee, a week or two later, he sends me this private message. He goes, I forgot to tell you. His victim was a 56-year-old man. His wife asked the judge at my sentencing, would you please order him to go to my husband's grave on the anniversary of that accident every year for 15 years and tell my husband he's sorry. And the judge ordered it. I thought that was brilliant. I loved that. But when I'm reading this going, oh my God. And so the guy, he goes on to say, tomorrow's the day. Is there anything you'd recommend? And my wheels are just turning. And I'm like, yeah. And of course, I was out of town that weekend. I said, go to his grave, take your 3-year coin. He only did 2 years in jail. And I'm not minimizing. I try not to compare, but sometimes it's hard. When you do 10 and they do 2, and I said, take your 3-year coin and tell him that he didn't die in vain and that you're helping other people, and leave that coin, And I told him all the things that I would do if I had the courage to do what the universe has asked this young man to step up to do. And I gave him my cell phone number. I said, tomorrow between 4 and 6, I will make myself available. I will sit by my phone. You call me and we'll process this together. You see, he thinks that I'm going to help him. He has no idea what he's about to do for me, right? And so the next day the kid calls me right at 4 o'clock, and we have like this 2-hour conversation, and I'm asking him, what did that feel like? What did you say? How did you feel? And how did you feel when you, I'm like hanging on his every word, and when we get done, like he feels so much lighter and so much better. And I just feel like God's got something on my plate, but I just don't know if I could do this. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know. And so then 2 weeks later, on October 17th, I celebrate 20 years of sobriety. October 17th. And the thought occurred to me, maybe I should take this 20-year coin over to the cemetery where that boy's buried, make my amends, and put that coin on that headstone. And then the next thought was, no, because I don't have coins 1 through 9. I was incarcerated. My first coin is my 10-year coin. So the 20-year coin is going to go in the little glass dish in my AA room with all the other coins, because I'm selfish like that, right? Any excuse will do to not do what God's asking me to do. So within 48 hours, other people were hearing, oh, Terri Cruz got her 20 years in. And so they're bringing me their 20-year coins. And I had like 3 20-year coins within 40. I'm like, are you serious? Like, really? Oh, God. So I took 1 to the glass dish in the AA room, 1 to my home group, and put 1 in the glove box of my car just in case. And then the kicker came a week later. I was sitting in a room much like this, training. I have to do so many hours every year to keep my optician license current. And the instructor was talking about the 5 transition lenses that are available in the U.S. market. That's what the program was on. He let the smokers have a break, and I wasn't paying attention to anything he was saying because I was thinking about all the strange things that had been happening, how close I was to the cemetery where this kid's buried, and maybe I should go there. And then he gives us a 10-minute break, and I go outside, and I think, well, maybe I should swing by there on my way home. It's kind of on the way home. And then the next thought was, oh, I would need at least $15, and I'm sure there's no cash in my purse. Now, why would you need $15 to go to a cemetery? I don't know. But there was the thought, anything to avoid doing what the universe was asking me to do. And so we sit back down. The instructor puts up a quiz. He puts a picture of the 5 transition lenses on this board behind him that are available in the U.S. market and says, take a piece of paper, number it 1 through 5, identify these lenses. And, of course, 30 opticians sitting in the room, I wasn't paying any attention. So I look at these lenses, I'm just taking my best stab at it, and I'm thinking, well, this probably isn't going to end well. 30 opticians in that room, only 1 got all 5 right. That one was me. And for getting all 5 right, he walked over to the table where I was sitting and laid in front of me 3 $5 bills. I am not making this up. That is a true story if I ever told one. And so I remember looking up, and there was one of those giant chandeliers very close to the table where I was sitting. I said, God, please don't drop that thing on my head. I will go. As soon as I am done here, I will go. And I finished training that Sunday afternoon. I went right next door to Walmart, and with that $15, I bought a spray that goes on top of a headstone, and I went to the cemetery where he's buried. And I had the flowers, and I had the 20-year coin. And I made an amends to a 14-year-old boy. And I told him how sorry I was, and that he did not die in vain, that I've been going all over the place telling this story, and that his memory's been kept alive, and that sometimes a good thing can come out of a bad thing, and it's horrible that that had to happen, and I'm really sorry. And if I could undo that, I'd undo it in a second. And I just felt like, I know he's forgiven me. I know it. And over the years, I had the same sponsor for 18 years, and then she died, and that, I was like trying to find a new husband. It was horrible. But Constance, my sponsor of 18, my original sponsor of 18 years, I used to ask her all the time, how do you make an amends for that? How do you set that right? And she would always tell me the same thing. You'll make your amends through right living by consistently doing the next right thing, setting up the tables, making the coffee, sponsoring other women. Maybe it means giving up a weekend of your life and going somewhere when you wanted to go to your granddaughter's softball tournament that weekend. She said, you'll make sacrifices. You're going to give. She goes, you're going to make things right through by doing the next right thing. And every time I step up to a microphone and I share my experience, strength, and hope, I move just a little bit closer to my amends. Thank you very much. Thank you.